Vincent van Gogh, a name synonymous with passionate colors and expressive brushstrokes, lived a life marked by extreme poverty. While creating his iconic paintings, he struggled to make ends meet. His art, barely recognized in his time, brought him little financial reward. Van Gogh was an artist far ahead of his time. His works, now celebrated as masterpieces, were dismissed as eccentric and unsaleable during his lifetime. He painted out of passion, but this passion brought him little bread. To survive, he relied on the financial support of his brother, Theo. In Van Gogh's time, one could have purchased a small pile of coal with the money that his paintings, now worth millions, would have fetched. That was just enough to fuel a stove for a few days. Or one could have afforded a few loaves of bread and some cheese, enough to survive for a few days. A painting celebrated as a masterpiece today was often worth no more than a few days' worth of food. There are, however, a few exceptions. Van Gogh did sell a few of his works during his lifetime, albeit at very modest prices. He managed to sell one of his paintings for 400 francs, a sum that provided him with a small financial relief at the time, but is negligible compared to today's record prices. One could argue that Van Gogh could have taken a simple job as a dishwasher or factory worker during his lifetime. While these jobs would not have made him a fortune, they would have at least provided a regular income. Perhaps he could have led a slightly more comfortable life. But Van Gogh was an artist through and through. Painting was his passion, his life. He could never have imagined giving up his art. Today, over a century after his death, the perception of Van Gogh's art has changed radically. His works fetch astronomical sums at auctions. Vincent van Gogh's Wheat Field with a Plowing Peasant, painted in 1889, is one of the artist's most iconic works. This masterpiece was sold at Christie's, New York in November 2017 for a staggering $81.313 million to an undisclosed buyer acquired from the original owners, Nancy Lee and Perry R. Bass. This iconic work is a prime example of Van Gogh's later, expressive and colorful phase. The vast expanse of the wheat field, disrupted by the laborious work of the peasant, conveys a sense of endless expanse and the connection between humanity and nature. The vigorous brushstrokes and vibrant colors lend the painting an almost tangible energy. Van Gogh's interest in ordinary people and their work is clearly reflected in this piece. Another iconic piece from 1889, Wheat Field with Cypresses, was sold in 1993 for $47 million to Walter Annenberg, who later generously donated it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The heirs of Emile Georges Burel were the original owners of this masterpiece. Considered one of the masterpieces of post-impressionism, this painting features slender cypress trees that tower like dark shadows against the golden wheat field, symbolizing both life and death. The dynamic brushstrokes and the strong contrasts between light and shadow create an almost musical effect. This work is an expression of Van Gogh's fascination with the forces of nature and the transience of life. The landscape near Saint-Remy, also painted in 1889, was auctioned at Christie's, New York in 2022 for $51.912 million. The identity of both the original owner and the new buyer remains a mystery. Painted during his stay at the Assouline in Saint-Remy, this work conveys a certain melancholy. The gentle hills, olive trees, and distant mountains create an atmosphere of peace and contemplation. At the same time, the dark clouds on the horizon hint at inner turmoil. This painting is a reflection of Van Gogh's state of mind during this period. Wooden Huts Among Olive Trees and Cypresses, another 1889 painting, was sold by Edward L. Cox for a substantial $71.411 million at Christie's, New York in 2021. The buyer's identity remains undisclosed. This painting depicts a simple rural scene with small wooden huts surrounded by olive trees and cypress. The warm colors and the calm composition convey a sense of security and peace. This work is an expression of Van Gogh's longing for a simple life in nature. Van Gogh's 1875 work, The Avenue of the Allées Grandes, was sold at Sotheby's in 2015 for $66.335 million. Unfortunately, details regarding the original owner and the subsequent buyer are not publicly available. This early work already demonstrates Van Gogh's interest in depicting space and perspective. The long, shady avenues of the Roman cemetery in Arras creates an almost mystical atmosphere. The muted colors and clear lines give the painting a classical elegance. One of Van Gogh's most famous portraits, the Portrait of Dr Gash, painted in 1890, was sold for $82.515 million at Christie's New York in 1990. Seto Reoe acquired it from the heirs of Siegfried Kramarski. This portrait is considered one of the most famous works of art history. Dr. Gash, Van Gogh's doctor and friend, is depicted with a melancholic expression. The yellow patches on his face and the uneven color scheme underline the psychological state of the sitter. This work is a revelation of Van Gogh's own inner turmoil. The vibrant irises, created in 1889, were sold by John Whitney Payson to Alan Bond for $53.911 million at Sotheby's, New York in 1987. This vibrant still life is a prime example of Van Gogh's expressive style. The bright colors and dynamic brushstrokes create an almost overwhelming effect. The iris flowers symbolize both beauty and transience. Van Gogh's Self-Portrait Without a Beard, painted in 1889, was sold by the heir of Jacques Coiffure for $71.52 million at Christie's, New York in 1998. The identity of the buyer remains unknown. This self-portrait shows Van Gogh in a calm and focused pose. The clear lines and strong colors underline the artist's determination. This work is an expression of Van Gogh's self-confidence and his dedication to art. The vase with cornflowers and poppies, painted in 1890, was sold to Wang Jiang at Sotheby's, New York in 2014. This colorful still life is another example of Van Gogh's love of nature. The bright colors and dynamic composition create a cheerful and lively atmosphere. One of the most expensive Van Gogh paintings, Orchard with Cypresses, painted in 1888, achieved a record-breaking $117.29 million at Christie's, New York in 2022. The heirs of Paul Allen were the original owners. This painting depicts an orchard with cypress trees against a bright blue sky. The strong colors and dynamic brushstrokes create an almost hypnotic effect. This work is an expression of Van Gogh's fascination with nature and its forces. If one were to add up the value of all of Van Gogh's works, it would amount to several $billion, especially when adjusted for inflation. This is an unimaginable sum that shows how much the value of art can change over time. Van Gogh's story is a striking example of how successes often comes only after death. His works, which received little attention during his lifetime, are now among the most famous and valuable in the world. He is a symbol of the recognition that often comes only posthumously and proof that art is timeless and retains its value. The fact that Van Gogh once sold a painting for 400 francs, while his works are now auctioned for hundreds of millions of dollars, underlines the enormous increase in value of his art. It shows how much the perception of art and the value of artists can change over time. The numbers speak for themselves. The prices paid for Van Gogh's paintings are staggering. They reflect not only the value of the artworks themselves, but also the status and prestige associated with owning such a piece of art.